Welcome to the Flora Sage Podcast, a place where we help you create a life you're excited about. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Oh my goodness, I am so freaking excited. So you all have been loving my conversation series, and today's conversation I think is going to be pretty freaking epic. So today we are having a conversation with Elaina K. Woohoo! I'm so excited to have her on the podcast for you guys. She is one of the most amazing people that I have had the privilege of coming in contact with. We have been working together on and off for, oh my gosh, like 10 years now, I think.
Literally, it's been a long time. Yes.
It's been a long time. It's so cool to see how she's grown, how I've grown throughout this time as well. And so without further ado, Elaina, for those who are just getting to know you, what would you like to share about yourself to get this conversation started?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Something about myself. Well, I guess it's great to kind of start off with what I do. I am an intuitive medium, and I'm a spiritual coach, and I'm a Reiki practitioner. So that's what I do in my business. I'm a mom of two amazing, incredible boys, and I have an amazing and wonderful husband. So yeah, that's my jam. That's what I do.
Woohoo! I love it. So have you always known that you wanted, well, actually, hang on. So before I ask this question, you recently just opened up a storefront, right?
Yeah, I have my office now. It's officially downtown in my small community town, which I love so much. So yeah, I officially got my keys in late August.
I am so excited.
Yeah, amazing. It's just like the experience of just receiving my keys has been a dream of mine, honestly, for so long.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, and I remember like way back in the day, you mentioned you're just like, I have this vision. And you were so crystal clear with that vision. And when I saw on Instagram that you got your keys, I literally was like head to toe goosebumps. I got a little bit clamped and I was like, oh my God, yes, yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's true. The vision was super clear of, what I really truly desired for myself. And I had to just trust that entire vision and the experience of where I was being led, even though I didn't know how it was all going to pan out at all.
Yeah. Right. So one of the things we talk about here on the podcast is the 1 degree shift, but also more importantly, aligning into who you know you're meant to be. And I don't know what you grew up as far as like for, like religious practices or whatever, but being a medium, being an intuitive sometimes goes against what we've been brought up to believe or whatever. And so share with us kind of that vision that you had early on in life where you knew that you were meant to do this work.
Yeah, so I literally can go as far back. I mean, I wouldn't say I can go as far back into my teen years knowing that I was going to do this work, but I will tell you for sure, my childhood had a massive impact on what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
I think our childhood, right, is a tremendous foundation for everything that we come to understand of who we are. What we desire for ourselves. It helps create that beautiful vision of our life. It comes in different stages and phases. I grew up actually Buddhist.
Cool.
Japanese, and she is Buddhist. My dad was from Birmingham, Alabama. Super awesome. Met my mom a week before Vietnam, and he was studying Buddhism before I met her. And, this is really important to tell because it's, the way that they came together universally, in my perspective, they were meant to meet each other. And so I grew up in a household that was my mom was, I would say, a little more strict. She really wanted us to stay connected to the roots of being Buddhist and to understand just study it and to understand it a lot more and to how to use it and apply it in our lives. And my dad was a lot more flexible, especially coming from Birmingham, Alabama. He said, no, let them explore, let them, which I love. I look back, I'm so what a gift, let them explore. I would say my mom might have had maybe a little bit more of a hard time kind of letting that happen. But interesting enough, that kind of created kind of my curiosity. It even invoked it and I would say amplified even more.
That's awesome.
So I grew up with all of my friends. I grew up in a very small town in California that was very Catholic based, a lot of Portuguese, Hispanic cultures, just very thick in Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my friends would go to church and I wasn't able to go.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I just had this tremendous desire at such a young age to go, whether it's because, it's like that thing like, yo, you can't do it. So now you want to go, right? Telling a kid you can't go to the candy store. They want candy now. So, but I remember being able one time to be able to go to a Catholic church. And I cannot even explain to you the feeling I had the minute I walked in. I literally will use the words, I felt like I was at home.
Aww.
And explain what I mean by that. I just know that there was an overcoming experience that I felt I think it was the environment, the thickness of just the energy in there. I was overwhelmed with it. And I was hooked to that feeling. And I didn't even understand at that age. I mean, I was really young. I must have been like 9 years old.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's when I met one of my best friends. And that's when I started going to church. My mom would let me go then all of a sudden because it was my best. So at that time I was like, yes, I mean, who wants to go to church at 9?
Right.
So that's where I would say it's my spark began is around that time. And I think from that point on, my curiosity to understand that feeling just took off. I wanted to understand what this feeling was. Mm-hmm. And it was like I can't even still to this day can explain to anybody of what really that was. But now I think I understand it. But back then, no one to go to about that.
How cool. So are you raising your children now with that same permission slip of, yes, you can go ahead and explore all the things? And
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. I think it's important for my children to understand like where I come from, like what I was raised with. I want them to understand all of it. I want them to be curious. Mm-hmm. I want them to also understand that there's, that religion is, or spirituality, all of it really is in my perspective, is to give this a kind of this root connection to a foundation for ourselves to take and carry with us in our life. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want my children to understand. It's not just about religion. I want you to understand why you're connected to that religion. What is it serving you? What does it give? Mm-hmm. So, and and if my children decide to do some sort of specific religion that they're connected with, I have to really trust that that's their journey. And it sometimes may not be as easy for some people. And I get that. It may not be easy for me. Who knows where it's going to take me, but I have to give my children the same gift I think my father gave us.
Yeah. So. That's awesome. So I do have a question though about your mom and her firm belief in this. Now, did you guys ever go to like a Buddhist temple?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I grew up going to Buddhist meetings all the time. And actually I did go to Japan and I did go to a temple at one point. Oh. I would say a very similar experience to how powerful that energy was. I've been in huge meetings, like they're huge, like conference meetings where everyone's chanting in the same tone. And it is very powerful. So I grew up with that, the bells, right? The incense. I mean, absolutely. It was the same powerful energy, whether it was church or a meeting, a Buddhist, right, gathering.
Love that.
Yeah, very, very intense energy, but beautiful.
How cool. I love that you were given that gift of exploration, but also the gift of presence so that you could feel it, like that visceral feeling when you are in that space and everybody's chanting and you're like, oh my gosh. And then you felt the same thing or similar when you went into that Catholic church and you were just like, hang on, wait a minute.
Right.
Let's explore, because that's a thing. It's like sometimes feeling something in one environment is like, okay, well, they did a good job with all the bells and whistles, literally in the Catholic Church, But
Right.
it's like when you're able to feel that in another space, it's like, hang on, what's the common denominator here?
Right. Right.
Oh, I love that you had that at such a young age. Oh my goodness.
Right. I think that looking back, talking about this out loud, I look back and going, wow, it was a really cool experience. I mean, I've even been to Baptist church. I have been to churches where they're speaking in tongue. I've been all of it. And it all just is so fascinating to me that I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing I take away, and the common thread for me, is that I'm connected to whether it's religion or spiritual connections, communities, meetings, whatever it is, where they're so deeply rooted in their faith, their connection to what that is for them. And the common thread for me is you can feel the energy move through you. And that is what I seek in my life, that same force of energy. Does that make sense?
Yes, I love that. Oh, I feel it. Yes, I understand 1,000%, because it's just like when you get that visceral, tangible, and it is, to me, it's a tangible feeling. I mean, it's like you can't help but recognize it and acknowledge it. Like, whoa, okay.
Right. Yeah, you can't deny it, and it does something to you.
It does. Yeah. So have you been able to kind of share this with your children as far as like letting them, maybe, I don't know, teaching them or having them kind of recognize like the shift that you feel when you're connected versus not connected? Now I say that loosely because we're always connected, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I try to do it in different ways that maybe they can relate to. But I've, done stuff with my kids where we've done meditation together, or I've done Reiki with them, or I'll try to have them, get them experiences where they're having contrast experiences, like really stressed beforehand and afterwards. How do you feel now? Like, because it's what we're still trying to do is just have this feeling of connection at the end of the day. So that's the way I can try in these baby steps, have my children kind of connect with those experiences first. We don't go to church. I've tried taking them and they didn't connect with it the most. I'm like, okay, I allow them to go. I'm like, let's just check it out. Like, you might like it. Like, do you want to join? My son has actually gone to a youth group. I'm like, cool, let's just check it out. Like, you might like it. I have no idea. Like, let's explore this. I have no idea where we're going to go with this. But I think my biggest desire for them is to find a place within themselves, or something that can kind of like I said, invoke that feeling within themselves of, I can lean on this.
Nice.
I can lean on this feeling. I can lean on this faith. I can lean on creating kind of their own standards, their own kind of, I don't know, their own connection.
Yes, I love that. So, oh my gosh, there's so many different avenues we could go. I love this. Okay, so when you realize, you're just like, wow, okay, I'm feeling the same or similar connection here in this church. Like, did you kind of try to bring that outside of those temples or the place of worship and just kind of bring it into your daily life? And if so, share with us what that was like.
Yeah. So you mean at a young age when I was going through all of this?
Yeah.
So interesting enough, I would say, wow. I mean, I myself can go in different ways with this too, because I had an experience at 13 years old related to a church that, wow, just even saying this out loud. So I got baptized at 13 and, which is it's a huge deal. Then it's, long story short, my parents were not aware of it. So I don't think that was even legal. I don't even know if it's legal or not legal, but I was this is a really important point to bring up because I got really frustrated after this. So at one point, everyone's like, oh, you're going to feel this experience when you get baptized. You're going to have an experience, blah, blah, blah. So I get dunked under and I come out and I don't feel anything.
Oh,
I'm like, wait a second. Wait a second. So you're telling me time, all of this curiosity, all of these years of connection to the church and all this, and I didn't have anything. So I felt a bit frustrated. And then I remember, I don't know if you know if it was that night or the next night, I had an experience. And I would believe, looking back, this is actually probably my first intuitive mediumship experience. Maybe looking back now, I think I had, where I felt an energy run through me that I couldn't explain. And then after that, it was silence.
Ooh.
It was for probably, I'd say, I don't know, 3 years. And I remember, this is going to bring back so many memories. I remember all of a sudden, do you remember like back in the days when we had radios? So people were like, what radio, right? Where you'd have to find the channel of a station. And I remember it was at night, I was in my room and I became, during those years, I was a teenager, self-described, you know how this whole thing goes. Anyways, so it's like dead silence as far as spirituality goes. And then all of a sudden one night, I remember being in my room and I was trying to find some music to like play because I was studying. And I in the like the late, I was like an 88.1 or 90.1 range on this radio station. And I came across, I live in California. So I came across this really cool radio station from UC Berkeley. And
cool.
The radio station. And I swear they were playing like Enya or they were playing, and I was like, what is this music? Wait, what is this? And I was having an experience and I was like, wait a second, I'm like having a feeling again. Oh. And it was the music that brought that out.
Oh,
and I thought, what in the world? Wait, I didn't understand this. So little did I know that I started looking forward to listening to that radio station. They had it once a week. And I would listen to it again. What 16, 17-year-old is doing this? Who knows? I thought it was really cool. And that's what I was doing. And when you ask, like, how did you bring that into your world? That's when I think that's when it kind of started opening up to me. Then interesting at that time, I was dating my high school sweetheart. And this is so crazy. This is so nuts. His mom was the coolest person. And she actually, and I don't know why to this day she gave me this book, but I was at his house and he must have mentioned to her that I was kind of into this stuff. I don't even know how it even happened. And she literally walks over to me and she brings over this book by Shirley MacLaine. And the book is called Out on a Limb. And that book changed my life forever. That was it. That was the book. And so synchronicity, coincidence, whatever you want to call it. So the minute I started listening to this music, I was like almost like an open channel again.
Oh, I love it.
I cracked open again. And the silence kind of started to fade away and I became more in tune again. And that's right about the time that I started making a massive life decision that I knew I had to make some serious change in my life because I was making decisions as a teenager that was not working good for me. And that was the time. So all of this book, all of it, the conversations that my best friends were having with me at the time. And they're like, I think you need to go to the military.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of, so there was like another phase opening up and that was the most pivotal time.
Yeah.
So sorry if that kind of doesn't, I don't know if it answers your question.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because a lot of people, and myself included, who do intuitive work, we do have that little pocket of time where it's like radio silence, whether it was like for mine, I was like, I'm not listening. I am, because a big major event happened and I was like, I am not okay with this. And I was like, so I forced radio silence, but for you, it just kind of like, all of a sudden you're like, hey, wait a minute. And then radio silence. And I think that from what I've seen in all the stories that I've heard, yours and mine, it's like, it's almost like that radio silence period is a way for us to navigate life without that connection, to see just how sideways life can go when we don't listen to that, you know?
Yes. 100%. Yes, you're right. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like, I don't know if it's a time where we need to have that human experience, that contrast in our life. I don't know what that was about for me. I mean, I know what it did for me. It gave me a lot of depth and understanding and wisdom and experience now as an adult. But I needed to go sideways. I think it was important for me to go sideways. I needed that.
Yep. Yeah. And that's usually where so much, that depth, as you said, it's like you literally kind of go into the bowels of humanity and you're like, oh God, like, wow, okay, and then it's like, because we're here to do work, like we're on a mission, like each one of us has this mission. And sometimes I think we do get in that space of, well, wait a minute, I'm a human though, like I'm here. And like, hang on. And it really is kind of learning to tune into that frequency and learning to trust it and learning just all the things about it. Because it's like, if you've never been in a place before, sometimes we don't know how to navigate. We don't know how to pivot. We don't know how to take that little 1 degree shift here or there. And we don't know how to align until all of a sudden we do go sideways for so long. And we're like, this is just not okay. And then we get a little glimmer of something, whether it's a, radio station with that song and all of a sudden you start to remember, not just from this lifetime, but from like that cosmic self of like that oneness self, we start to remember. And then we're like, oh,
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And then you start to have those knowings and those nudges that start to bring you into alignment by maybe not talk to this person and maybe join the military. I know I was there too. Both of us are veterans. And it's one of those things where you just have that knowing.
Right. Oh. Yeah. And if you look back, but if I look back, the radio station for me, finding that radio station was like a metaphor of tuning into the frequency of myself.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Not really what I think is what it was. I mean, of all the stations, why would a teenager be checking out, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
101s to the 106 point something. That's where good music is. No one's listening to like 88 point something.
Right.
Star of the day, right? That was like the news or church. It was actually church music sometimes. So it's really that I was tuning into that radio station area. I still don't know what led me to it. So strange.
That's so cool. So when you started to tune into that and you started to kind of really understand, maybe not even understand, but just start to trust that knowing and that inner kind of thread that's kind of guiding you along, did you get any pushback from the people in your life who maybe didn't agree with what you were making? Because I mean, a lot of the times when we make those decisions from intuition and from where we know, like, because your intuition will always keep you into alignment. It will always do those little tiny micro course corrections. But sometimes when other people see us making those choices, they might either agree or disagree, or kind of, they're just like, what's going on here? So did you get any pushback from people when they saw you start to make these little adjustments and, start to come into who you knew you were meant to be?
I think the time that I got the most pushback was when I was actually exploring as a young teenager, preteen especially. Mm-hmm. I remember being with my best friends, still are my best friends to this day. Back then, looking back, I would have moments where I was having like, oh my gosh, you guys saw it. Is it weird? Anyone ever like living? Like I would have like weird off the wall philosophy questions. Like I was exploring deeply at like 11 years old. And my friends were like, you're so crazy, Elaina. Like that was all that me. But like stuff like that, I started to silence myself actually looking back then, like, oh, I can't talk about this stuff with them. No one's going to understand. That was my story. I have no one to talk to, not even my own parents. I had nobody to really explore this with, except there was a really cool friend that I had when I was 14 years old that I met. She was actually a senior, and until this day, I after she graduated, lost contact with her, but she was one of the coolest people in the world. And she was Christian, but she was really open-minded, and we had lots of deep conversations. So I felt like I had that one person I could go to. But when I was making decisions, when I was finally cracking back open, I was that 16, 17-year-old time frame. I didn't really talk a lot about what I would say I was going through at the time. I think it's because I was living in two lives. On one end, I was kind of closing a chapter to a really hard couple of years of myself, growing up, making bad decisions, poor choices. And on the other end, I was kind of closing that chapter, but also figuring out like who this new person was.
Yeah.
And so again, starting, as much as it was igniting me and I was making really positive change in my life, I don't know if I was even, I would say I was afraid to kind of explore that reconnection or talk about it. I just knew that there was change happening, but my silence would kind of go dead again until my son was born.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How interesting. Okay. So share with us that moment. I'm so intrigued. I love this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I did the military thing. I think again, I think it was always in me. This whole reconnection was back. It was in me, but I had to learn who this new person was. I've always been in there. I think this was just me getting comfortable with this new, I would say this new Elaina that I never knew I had in me. If this makes any sense. And I went to the military and I learned, I was like, wow, Elaina, like you can actually really do a good job of stuff. Like, I think growing up, I didn't have that confidence. So going to the military, I learned how to hustle. I learned how to work hard, as a veteran, what I'm talking about. I learned that I loved structure. I learned so many different aspects of myself. I met my first husband actually in the military. It just so many great things came out of my life during that period. And so I would say that I wasn't silenced because I was choosing to be silent. I just didn't think it was the time I didn't need that spirituality, that faith in that time to believe, right? I didn't need it. I was living life, was just moving along, chugging along. Things were happening. Yeah. And then my father died. So interesting enough, my father wasn't feeling well. And this was another intuition part that tried to come back up to me. It worked though. It came back in. I had an option to get out of the military or stay in. And I chose to get out for some reason, even though I was being officer to be transferred over to be an officer. I was doing really well in the Air Force. I had doing really, really, really good. And I know I would have been really successful, but for some reason, my intuition told me, get out. So I got out of the military. Literally, I had the strangest gut feeling, and I had a feeling to get out because I just knew that if I had stayed in, I kept hearing, if you stay in, you're never going to be able to get back home. And I couldn't explain why I even felt that way. But my dad, long story short, my father ended up having stage 4 cancer. None of us knew. Yeah. So he had cancer, and this happened. My dad, I got out right before 9/11.
Oh, wow.
My dad died 2 days after 9/11. And I was highly trained in the Air Force to be the person that would basically go to certain war zones and set up the command center. I was that person. So if I had stayed in, I would have been gone. So I wouldn't have been able to spend this time with my dad. So my intuition kicked in. I didn't know this back then, right? But now looking back, I get it. But again, I was still silenced. My dad had passed away. My divorce, my husband happened. I met my current husband, love of my life. And then basically I was silent until my son, when I gave birth to him, everything fully started happening. Sorry, that was like a long way to answer, but it's important to kind of prep to how I got here. So my son was born, and I remember I was long hours of breastfeeding. And I remember I'm like, I'm going to go to the library. I'm going to grab some books so I can read books while I'm breastfeeding. And lo and behold, there's spirituality section of the library, there is a book by Shirley MacLaine sitting right there on the shelf, and called The Camino. And I was like, I know I love Out on the Limb. I'm going to grab this book. And I read the entire book in one night.
Oh, nice.
My husband's a fireman, so I was just home alone. So by the time I went to bed, I just read and read. I like literally, it's all I did was read all day, read that night. I read the whole book, and it cracked open. Oh. I know that that's the moment, and that I've been cracked open since.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, and it's so, oh my gosh, I just love this because it's so telling that if we are meant to have something happen, by God, Spirit is going to make it happen. And I love that echo of her came back. Right. And you were like, oh, heck yeah. Because you knew, I mean, that is 1,000% a sign from Spirit. Like, hey, yoo-hoo, remember us?
I mean, and it literally felt like the book was illuminated sitting on the shelf. I'm like, I mean, I don't even know like why I went to that section. I wasn't like, I mean, now I look back, I was being called, but it's not like I went and sought it out.
Yeah.
So sitting right there, I'm like, stop it right now. I was like, sure. I was like, stop it. The thought was, she wrote another book. Well, of course she wrote another book. I think she 80s, I'm more 70s, who knows, but of course. Yeah.
So the visual that I got is, like in like old school cartoons, when there was like a scent and somebody like floated and followed the scent, it's almost like Spirit had this like scent of this book, and you just were like, oh, hey, what? She wrote another book. Fabulous.
Right. It was exactly, that's probably what it was, right? But it was my intuition leading me there. They're like, come on, get closer. She's almost there.
That's so cool. I love it. And so it's like, okay, so share with us what happened then, because I mean, I feel like this is like a play-by-play. It's like, it's so cool. So share with us what happened then, because it's like, you could have just read the book and been like, okay, yeah, you could have gotten busy as a mom and a wife and, all the other things, but you chose to, follow that. And now this is what you do for a living. So share with us kind of the play-by-play of what happened next after you read the book and you're like, oh my gosh, wow. Now I'm like cracked absolutely wide open.
Right. So, yeah. So, wow. The book became, it became a foundation of energy for me that I had no idea that I was going to need to lean on really deeply. When my son, I knew it when he was 2 days old. I know this sounds crazy, but actually it probably isn't crazy. I think any mom's listening to me or you could probably relate. Something was off, and I knew something was off with my son. I could not figure it out. Something didn't feel right. And so as I finished this book, now I'm also in another parallel experience where I'm reading every single possible childhood development book about milestones for children, because my son wasn't meeting the milestones. And severe GERD, severe colicky at 9. I couldn't put him down. He was fussy all the time. Like he wasn't, just all of the signs were there, but looking back, but so here I am reading all these. Now I'm starting to read other books, right? All this stuff's kind of starting happening, but I'm also now these childhood development books, and I'm just chugging along. Probably at this point now, we're like 2 years. I'm just reading books. This is like nothing's going on at this point, but I remember there's things that had happened in those 2 years. Like we moved to our real home that we're still in now. Like all these other things. I got pregnant again. My second son, they're 15 months apart. Like all of these crazy experiences were happening. So I didn't have really time to explore what the spiritual books were meaning. I just knew I just were enjoying them. But my oldest was 2 years old. Something in me was screaming. And I remember thinking, you need to do research. You need to do research. I said, okay. So I would go on the computer all the late nights when my kids were in bed. And I was reading, like, all of the stuff I was researching would lead me to a thing called leaky gut. And I'm like, what is leaky gut syndrome? Like, what is this? And all of the signs, my son was meeting all of these signs that kept leading me to a thing called autism. Oh my gosh. Like, I think my son has autism. I think my son has autism. So something, all of a sudden, a voice came in and said, get his fecal matter tested. Go get it. I don't know why I thought this. So I went to my amazing pediatrician, and who was super cool and open-minded. And I was like, this is what I think. I printed out of all these things. And I said, I think my son has this. I think he has this thing called autism. And like, well, let's get his labs tested. I go, I think he has what's called, like, it's called Candida. I think it's called candiditis or yeast overgrowth. And sure enough, he had it. Sure enough, he had it. Then that led me from there, boom, 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 getting him diagnosed with a state, flying colors, autism. And so all of these things were starting to have happen in my life. Okay. So as this kind of starts happening, then basically at this point, I was in, like, we had, like, I don't even know how many hours of in-home therapy at the time, occupational therapy, I think 10 to 15 hours of ABA therapy. We had speech, we had clinical supervisor hours. Like, we had so much to get my son healed, to get him on this track to healing. You know, this time I became severely burnt out. Right after my son was diagnosed, my other son was also diagnosed less than a year later.
Oh, wow.
And so my kids on the spectrum. And the second was more learned behavior. That's a whole different story. But anyways, long story short, I became burnt out. I was burnt. And I remember thinking, if I don't do something about this, how I feel, if I don't find a way to, like, get this good feeling back, this energy source, whatever this is, feeling good, grounded, healthy, wellness, self-care, self-love, if I don't start making this a priority, then I was going down a really dark, deep depression hole. And that's kind of where I feel like my next kind of cracking open started to happen. And my friend came over one day, and out of nowhere says, have you ever heard of this woman named Esther Hicks? And I said, what are you talking about? No. And she said, I want you to watch this video. And she put on this video on YouTube. And the minute I watched this video, it was as though everything, those connections, going to the church, the temples, the books, the radio station, all of it was the same energy. I was like, it was truth ringing through my body. It was an energy that was vibrating so loud that I couldn't deny it. And that was just amplified beyond. And that is where I think I really went deep. And so yeah, that's a long story. That's kind of where it took me.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Oh, well, and I think too that you reading those books at the same time that you were reading the other books and having that parallel experience gave you that, I think, deeper connection to motherhood. I mean, even though, like, we all have that anyway, but it's like all of a sudden you get super fine-tuned into that frequency of read this book. Okay, now this book. Okay, now this book. Okay, now this book. And that connection to source helps you, because there's a sea of books that you could absolutely get lost in and feel frustrated and go, okay, I'm done. But it's like you were given that breadcrumb trail, your little 1 degree shifts of like, okay, here's 1 degree, here's one, and it's like, and that helped you align into that space of clarity of, this is exactly what I think my son has. And your doctor confirmed it with tests. And it's like, think of all those people who don't have that clarity. And it's not, I mean, life is messy and sometimes we don't get clear and sometimes we're in the muck of it for so long. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait a minute. Okay. Yes.
Right.
And sometimes it feels kind of helpless. And sometimes you feel hopeless when you're in all of that heavy humanness. And, even though you have support and you have all the skills and all the tools, sometimes navigating all of that is just exhausting. And I love that your friend kind of intuitively was like, oh, hey, have you heard of Esther? Because that energy is so uplifting and so refreshing and so high vibrational that you're just like, oh, this feels good. It's almost like a spa day for the soul.
Yeah. And was exactly who needed to be in my life at that exact time, even the timing of meeting her, like all of it.
Mm-hmm.
When we meet certain people at that exact moment and phase in our life, that was meant to be.
Yeah.
They're supposed to bring forth that energy, that message, the delivery of something. We don't know it yet, but it's every encounter with any human is important.
It is. It is. Well, and I love that you trusted that inner knowing, because so many times I've gotten so many messages from people over the years about people really trusting what they get. It's like, can I really trust this? It's like, well, go to your heart of hearts. Like, really just close your eyes and sit with it for just a hot second, because when you sit with it, you'll be able to feel if it's in alignment, because it feels kind of balanced. It feels steady. When something feels off, or it's just, it literally feels off. I mean, like literally like you're tipping from one side to the other. You know what I mean?
Right. It's true.
Yeah.
And around certain people, even in those moments where you feel off with them, I always tell my clients, pay attention to that.
Yes.
Why are you feeling off with that energy? What is it doing to you? What is coming up to contrast?
Yeah. Yeah. And that contrast is something that's huge. And I think a lot of people, I know myself included over the years, we don't like the contrast because it is so, it's like good or bad or this. And you're like, oh my God, for the love of God, just stop already,
Right.
But it teaches us so much. And it's like, I actually made a video years and years ago, basically saying that there is no good, bad, or indifferent. Everything just is. And then of course I got the comments about death and all. I'm like, yeah, and all the spectrum of all that. And it's like, yes, there are some really tragic and very horrible things, but everything that happens is literally neutral. We attach meaning to it. However, everyone is here for a purpose and a reason. I truly believe that. And so where something is good for you, it might be bad for somebody else, or they might resonate with this where you don't. And that's a beautiful thing, is because each one of us has this perfect path for us. And sometimes that perfect path is consistent of many different paths, and we can choose, because that's free will, right? And it's like, so we can choose to do this work, or we can choose to put it on the back burner while we're doing something else. And I also think that, and I hear this a lot, especially with people who want to be an intuitive or be a medium or be a coach or whatever. It's like they feel like they have to hurry up and do it now. And one of the things that I've learned, I mean, I'm 47. I say that sometimes I feel old and sometimes most of the time I don't feel old. I'm like, oh, I'm good. But like back in my day, it's like 47, it was old. Now it's not. It's like whatever. But in any case, so in all my 47 years, I've come to learn that when we have those moments of rest, or we have those moments of a pause.
Yes.
I truly believe that when we're pausing to pivot into that space of where we know we need to go, or our ego doesn't know it, but our soul does. And it's almost like if you've ever seen shipping lanes where they have these giant ships and they come into the dock, and then all of a sudden there's this little tiny tugboat and they're like, wee, and they like turn this giant ship, and they like literally turn it. They're like, all right, ooh, there you go. And that's literally what it's like. It's like you're pausing so that you can pivot. And a lot of people resist that pause.
Right. Yes. Yeah. What a great thing to talk about, because I have a lot of clients that put time frames on things. And I always remind them, there is no time frame on learning. There's no time frame on this growth that this internal work we're doing.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to be, I think that's the biggest thing I've learned, is to be in such flow with everything that is happening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're in this space of flow and we release and detach ourselves from this time frame, we become so much more open to receive with clarity those messages and all these different things. And, I've learned that in my practice. And I think that when a lot of my clients finally start getting that, I mean, I have a client I've been working with for almost a year, and she just recently said this to me. And she said that if anything, the biggest thing that she has taken away from our time together is learning to really understand what it means to be present, to be in flow with what's happening. And she's been able to let go and learn so much about herself and everything that's kind of happening in her life and understand it from a different perspective.
Oh, I love that. Well, and the thing about humanness, especially in the time that we live in right now, it's so fast paced.
Yeah.
It's so instant, where you grab your phone, everything is instant. You can get something next date or same date from Amazon, woo. It's like,
right.
Hey,
Yeah.
But I think sometimes as spiritual beings, our spirit guides are like, oh, good grief. It's okay to have it go slower. But the thing is like in the cosmos, our lives are like that. It's like this tiny little blip. And however, those tiny little blips can make just a massive ripple effect on the planet and in the universe. And I think that sometimes the first going through those pauses and pivots, it's oh my gosh, it's really hard. But as we age and not even as we age, but just as we come to understand the enormity of what you learn. I mean, it's really like the slower that you go, the faster you're actually accelerating. And I heard that for years. I'm like, yeah, it's a bunch of shit, whatever. But it's like sometimes you're forced into that pause, and then you come out of it, you're like, wow, I'm light years ahead of where I was before. And I think our egos really like to just push and try to get stuff done. And we have these to-do lists and we want to check things off and we want to get this certification or that certification or do this and do that. And people power through their meditations instead of just actually surrendering and just being like, time is limitless. Like time responds to me. And it's like, wow, it's huge when you finally get to that space of non-resistance and you really just get into that space of surrender and say, yeah, like, okay, I am just going to be present in this moment. You just are the embodiment of this because your energy is just like the essence of just chill and just grace. And it's like, oh, I love it. There was this meme or something that I saw. It said calmness, and what the definition of calmness is graceful confidence. And I'm like, that is Elaina to the core.
Oh, thank you. Well, I appreciate that perspective. I think that I have definitely come from many different phases and situations and pauses, and I'm able, I think the more I lean into this type of experience, the more I'm able to reflect back and say, oh, I so understand why that was a pause, or I can understand why I needed that pause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those looking back reflective moments, I can lean deeper into this space of where I am now and say, I can really breathe through this. I can trust something bigger is coming out of this.
Yeah.
I'm growing in this time, in this experience right now. And so I don't think I always was where I'm at now, like how I am now. I don't think I've always been this way. I think it's been developed over time.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some deep growth periods of my time, especially with my oldest son and all of that. And just having to trust myself, trust the experiences, because there were some moments in all of that where I just didn't want to trust.
Yeah.
I mean, really dark, deep moments where I didn't know how I was going to get through the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes that's when spirit does do those little whispers, those little, hey, do this,
Yeah.
do that, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And it is almost like white knuckling it sometimes where you're like, oh, I'm here for the ride, but what the hell?
I no, and that when you were in those moments, it's not, you don't, sometimes, the truth is sometimes we don't want to go, oh, let's read a spiritual book. No, a lot of us don't want to do that. It's in the quieter moments that those popping out the Sherman McLean book, seeing it on the library shelf comes out, or sometimes it's through a conversation that we get guidance through a friend, or just allow ourselves to cry on their shoulder, or just being honest about what's happening.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the thing is a lot of people want to do the type of work that we're doing. And other people are just like, no, I'm good. And I know that I'm meant to make an impact with just each individual that I'm meant to bump into when I'm walking my dog or at the grocery store or whatever. And, sometimes there's a fine line because sometimes people try to force that calling or that longing, where sometimes it's like, no, sometimes we're not meant to be the next Oprah, or we're not meant to be, we're just meant to be in our pocket in the world and just do our thing and just hold the space for ourselves and whoever just comes into our bubbles. And I think that really learning to trust and really learning to navigate that conversation and that narrative in our own head is huge. And I love that people can come to you and work with you long-term so that they can learn how to do that, because that's not always easy, learning how to just shut off ego or just tell ego, all right, sit down, you're good, and really learn to trust that voice of intuition. So share with us, again, I could go in so many different directions. So share with us, well, actually, no, I think I want to ask you a different question first. So if you could go back yourself right now, if you could go back to when your kids were, 4, like your oldest son was 4, what would you tell yourself? Like maybe in a dream, maybe I'm going to take a nap. My kids are sleeping. I'm going to take a nap. And all of a sudden you are like future Elaina. It's like, woohoo. You're like, what would you tell yourself to, what would you tell yourself?
I love it so much because I've done this kind of often with my husband. We talk about this a lot. If I can go back to that time period, I would let myself know that everything's going to be okay. And that all really is well, all really is well. And that every day that I show up for myself, I exude an energy in my sacred space of my home, for my allowance, that I'm allowing my son to launch off from.
Oh, I love that.
And so that makes sense that it's going to be okay. So you're not selfish if you need to take a break. You're not selfish if you need to take a nap. It's okay if you're falling apart. It's okay if you don't have it together. Who cares if the house is dirty?
Yeah.
Like all of these different things. But also the biggest thing that I would tell myself is surrender what anyone thinks of what's happening.
Yes.
Who cares? Because at that time I was living deep in my ego, and also grieving this perspective in life I thought that we were all going to have. And not bad in any way. My life, looking back, all of it's been beautiful. Everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. My son is my biggest teacher. Both my boys are. But the thing I would look back now, and look at that time, I would say I was living through tremendous ego, where I was so worried what people thought, that my son was nonverbal, that he was stimming, that he didn't know how to verbalize things. And so he was very expressive in his, frustration at times. But also I can understand that I was doing my very best. So, but I would surrender what people thought. I would just be like, who cares?
Yeah.
Be with your son, be present, be connected to this moment. This is your experience with your family. Enjoy every moment because it's going to pass.
Yes.
going to pass. You're never going to have this time again. Be with him at 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. You're going to get through this. It's going to be fine.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So speaking of being fine, so today is election day when we are recording this, and the tensions, it's palatable. I'm like, wow, like this is insane. It's not insane. It's crazy just thinking how a social event, and I mean, it is very pivotal. I mean, we have all kinds of things being decided on with propositions, with people going into the House and the Senate. And it's like, so, oh my God. I mean, there's everything, every day there is something, whether it's an election or the kids spilled the milk, or the cat threw up, or the dog went diarrhea, or you got your period and you just ruined all the sheets, or I mean, all, you know what I mean? It's like life is messy. Yeah. Life is messy. Life is intense sometimes. Maybe the neighbor's house burned down, or maybe the neighbor, I don't know, put a camera and you can see. I mean, it's like all the things, And, ego comes in all the time, and oh, this is so unjust. And why are they doing this? And there's all of this noise. And sometimes, because there's so much noise, sometimes it's hard to hear what we are feeling inside, because we're so bombarded with all these external stimuli that we almost kind of are deaf to what's going on inside, and to being able to navigate that and being able to really listen and hear and surrender to that. So what would you say for our listeners and watchers here? What piece of advice would you give them to help them navigate among all the noise and all the chaos that is our modern society?
Yeah. What a great question. Because I live this every day, right? The news is on. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming. We read, wherever we go, we're hearing about someone's drama, something that's going on. We witness it in our everyday life. Politics, the movements of this world that's happening in the last couple of years. Like, how do we deal with this? I think the first thing I always try to remind myself is that the energy of the world begins with the spark of ourselves.
Ooh, I love that. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Meaning that how I choose to use my energy today, how my intention of myself, the love I give myself, all of those big, people think it's all cliche. Well, guess what? It's not. Because those people out there that are making big movements that are happening, that are shaking up the world, it started with a simple intention within themselves too, did it not? It's the same energy. So our spark matters. And I think a lot of the times, the reason why I think so many of us turn on the news and we want to get involved in someone else's drama and all this, because we feel like if we're involved in that, then we're making big movement happen. They think it's over there. But the movement that happens starts with ourselves.
Yes.
But don't ever disregard that the simplicity of you and working on your personal energy, that you think it doesn't have an impact on the world. It actually does. Yeah. Because if we each chose to do that, if we had one person, 5 people, 10 people, it starts to become 100, 1,000, 1,000,000. If we start doing that, there could be massive waves, but even us makes massive waves. So I try to remember that I might feel small in my ego, human experience mind, but in the universal experience, my spark is part of that creates the big spark of life.
Yes.
It's the part of the one. We're all connected.
Yep. Yes.
So I try to remind myself that I give myself permission to say, if I don't feel like listening to the news right now, that's okay. If the next day I feel like I want to watch the news and understand what's happening, I can do that. If I want to have a conversation with somebody about what's happening, I can do that too. But if I also want to kind of be more in the space where I'm kind of more connected with myself right now, give myself that space. I give myself permission to be there too. I need to trust what I'm going through. But the biggest thing is starting with your intention, your self-love, you know, what you want to bring to this world. What is, you always talk about, which I love. What is your legacy? Oh my God, I love when you say that. What is your legacy? What is your mark on the world?
Yep.
My mark on the world I want to bring is I want people to be reminded about their lights. I want them to be reminded about their love and how much of an impact that they can make on the world in that way, in a positive way. That's what I want to do. So in all of this craziness that's happening right now, don't forget your spark. Don't forget.
Oh, I love that. So share with all of us who are listening and watching how someone can work with you privately or in a group setting, because your energy is so incredible. And like I said, I've known her for a decade and it's like you are so consistent in who you are and how you show up, and with your mission to serve and to be of service. And it's just incredible. So share with everybody how they can work with you in the ethers, whether it's, like privately or whatever. So,
yeah. So, I do readings. I do intuitive mediumship readings, with people all over, not obviously just in California, all over. And usually people start there. And my mediumship readings, my intuitive mediumship readings are not necessarily based on like telling you what's going to happen and what's going on. I really help you use that time in a connective way to get clear, tap deep within your wisdom of like what you need to get honest about. You need to get about in your life. I feel like whenever the reading's the right timing, it's going to show up for you. And hour we just explore naturally. I love doing cold readings because I love people to really understand there's a cool connection happening with their guides and all of us. And we tap into this deep knowing of like what you need to get honest about in your life. And the whole purpose of this is to make the change happen, to help you create room in your life to receive that energy so you can connect and align with the life you're meant to live, your authentic life path. And, from there, people will do spiritual coaching with me because now they want to take it to the next level, right? They want to do deeper work. And then sometimes people like that have worked with clients, they want to do some energy work. So all this happens through my website. They can go to www.elainak.com, which is ELAINAK.com. Spell it out. And get access to my readings and all this. And I do it through Zoom. And we go from there. And I always tell people, if you have questions, like reach out to me. I want people to walk into this experience knowing that they feel connected working with me. That's the biggest thing. They feel connected. So yeah.
Well, and your energy is so welcoming, and it's so, like I said, calmness. It's that graceful confidence that is very approachable. And you are just, I've never seen you judge anybody. Like, some people can be judgy if you're having a bad day or just, they're just, people are judgy in general. Yeah. But I've never seen, and you're such a breath of fresh air. You're so incredible.
Yeah. And, thank you to you too, for being such a, I just I think I need to say this too. You came into my life exactly when I was ready for a mentor and teacher. So, I think also you were another person looking back that I was ready for. The connection happened with divine timing. And I think what you showed me was to just lean on my own confidence, like in my own wisdom. And you always provide that for all of us. I think that's what why I love listening to your podcast and just, the wisdom that you give all of us. You're coming from a place of experience. You have a great open mind of how you share your wisdom with the world. And I love that you offer that. That's what I think what you give us, so I just really appreciate that you were that mentor and teacher for me all of those years, giving me that.
Thank you. Yay. Thank you. Well, and you were with me back in the day when I had like all kinds of things. I had like 2 memberships and over 3,000 hours worth of content and all the things. Now I'm just kind of very, very niched, but it's being a simplification coach. Myself, it's that we simplify all the stuff, all the noise that's getting in the way of you living an authentic life and being in alignment.
Yeah.
For who you're meant to be and for the mission that you're here to fulfill. And sometimes that's not easy. And I love that. I love that we crossed paths, and I love that you're here sharing your vibe and all of your deliciousness to everybody, because it's like, that's just the thing. It's just like when our souls are craving knowledge and when we're craving that truth in a world of a facade. I mean, there's so much that's just a facade that's not authentic and not genuine. Our soul is craving it like a pregnant woman craves a cheeseburger. You're just like, and like when you finally hear the truth, you're like, yes. And your soul just drinks it in and you're like, thank you. And it is so refreshing to be able to be in that space of authenticity and of truth. And and I love having these conversations here on the podcast because it allows people to listen in their own time, or watch on YouTube, and to be able to come back to it whenever that they need to, or find it whenever they're, breastfeeding their babies, or when you're in a low spot and you just search, whatever, and all of a sudden this pops up. And to be here and to kind of be that voice for people when they are starting their journey, or maybe they're farther along than we are, and they can think back and, I remember when I was in that place in my journey, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to share this. And I love that you shared where you came from and started and where you're at now. I love it. Thank you so much for being here.
You for giving me this most amazing opportunity. Truly, like, just, it's the timing is perfect. The timing is.
Thank you. Yes. All in divine timing, right?
It always is. It always is.
So good. All right, Elaina. So I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to be talking. I'm sure we're going to have you on a bunch of times if you're willing.
I would love it. Love it. Yeah. And it's just so great. And please continue what you're doing, because I think that was one last thing I wanted to say. Watching you through the years and what you've done with your personal journey has reminded me to trust mine.
Oh, thank you.
Right? Why we need mentors and teachers in our life.
Yeah.
That's what you've given me. So thank you, Flora, so much.
Oh, well, thanks for sticking around. I know sometimes it felt like a shit show. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, because I kept feeling like, okay, here's another pivot. Okay, here's another pivot. Here's another pivot. And people would get really pissed. Like when you make a pivot and they don't agree with it, they're just like, whoa, lots of backlash. And I'm like, you can be mad all you want, but I'm going to stay in alignment with my mission. And you might not understand my mission, but I'm here to kind of be an example of what's possible. It's like, I'm not here to be one version of myself for the rest of my life. I'm here to evolve and change my mind if that's what I'm if that's what I'm guided to do. Like I actually had a conversation with somebody. I know we're kind of keep going. I actually had a conversation with somebody when I was in line voting, and I was talking about how it's interesting how and why people vote the way that they do, and how some people don't do any research. They just vote what they've heard to do, and how some people will change their mind and they like flop from one party to the other party. I'm just like, and it's like me, I'm a voter to where I vote for the person. I research them. I research their voting history. I look at the things that matter to me, but I'm always open to changing my mind because I don't know what I don't know, and so I know what I know, but that's like a tiny drop in the bucket. And there's so much other stuff out there. And I love that you've been that sacred witness to my journey and my growth. And, it's been a very public transformation. And, Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, because it's not easy sometimes for people to kind of go into these new iterations of ourselves. And I actually just had a conversation with Shauna Marie a few weeks ago, that we were talking about, because she has stayed in the town that we grew up in, and I flew the coop and have kind of been traveling all over. So we talked about kind of the backlash of what it's like to reinvent yourself, where people think that they know everything about you, versus reinventing yourself and pivoting in a place that people have no clue who you are.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think if anything, that's what I truly admire about you, is that you stick through with what aligns most with you. And that's honoring your truth, your authenticity to what feels right for you, whether people like it or not. I always tell my clients, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, if you're not feeling good with it, you'll know at the end of the day, but when you're listening to yourself and you're connecting with that and you're living that out, oh my God, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, that's true. And so all of you who are watching this or listening, this is like a through line for us today, is just trust. I mean, your path is going to look different than you think it's going to be. Like, oh my gosh, my vision for my life ended up so different so far. I'm like, woo, I'm here for it.
It's so true. Yes, 100%. My vision of what I thought was going to happen with me, it's not even matching up. So yeah, be in flow, trust the experience. Everything's happening exactly as it should be. Even in the hardest of moments, it's all leading you somewhere. Listen, pay attention, trust it. Yeah.
Yes. Yay. All right. With that, we're going to end our podcast episode for this week. So thank you all so much for listening. Elaina, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. You are so incredible. All the links to connect with Elaina on social media, her website, everything will be in the show notes. So please click on them, connect with her. And yes, thank you all so very much. If you've loved this episode, please share it with anybody who you think might enjoy this conversation. And I truly love these conversations. My goal with these are to just pretend that you're sitting down with us, having a cup of coffee or a glass of water, and just riffing about whatever. There is no agenda for these conversations, so except for just to shed light on whatever needs to pop out. So Elaina, again, thank you so very much for being here.
Welcome. Thank you again too. So awesome.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you so very much for listening. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye. If you've been loving these episodes, it would mean the world to me if you would rate this podcast on iTunes. A 5-star rating is what I always aim for. All links mentioned are in today's show notes.